All right, well, we're back on episode 5 of the Spark Show. Hard to believe it's been 5 podcast episodes. Doesn't feel like too much of an accomplishment, but we've had a lot of burning through our minds, and it was my great pleasure to have Cameron Collier back on the show. I think we're going to basically make this a habit. I like the way that the conversations flow, and I like the way that we dissect some of the thoughts that we have on modern day politics, religion, and pop culture, essentially. So, Cam, good to have you back on the show.
Good to be here. A lot of fun last time, so stoked to be going at it round 2. See how it goes.
Yeah, no, fun to kind of see the conversations go from in the work van to in the podcast studio. Makes it a little bit more realistic. Feels like there's a little bit more riding on the line, kind of a little bit more high stakes. But I think, like we've always said, we think it's good to share our message and our thoughts with what, maybe others might find similar to what we're thinking.
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, there's so much craziness in the world and so much extremism in people's speech. I think it's really important for as many people as possible to kind of bring the temperature down and have you can have critical conversations without losing your mind. So I think the more that do that, the better it will be.
Yeah, I think at one point you and I feel like maybe it was more high school. We didn't exactly see eye to eye. I think I was pretty conservative. Didn't really call myself that in high school because I didn't really know exactly what political ideology was and, exactly the sides. But I kind of knew what I was. I knew I supported more conservative presidents and things like that and conservative policy. And that's just what I vocalized, but didn't really come into my own until after high school. But I think we had some pretty interesting conversations, with liberal ideas that maybe you were consuming in high school, I felt like. And then now I've seen a little bit more turn of the tide into conservative ideology.
Well, things change when you have kids and when you actually have to face reality. But no, in high school, I definitely was the pothead hippie kid. I was all about the Bob Marley scene, all about the peace and love and make love, not war, that whole, cliche of the liberal side of things. And I'm still like that, but much more grounded and not so much into altering the mind anymore. Like to stay grounded, not, I feel like you can get really influenced by other means when you're under the influence. So I like to keep it sober now.
I like it. So what do you think, aside from kids, before you had kids, what sort of brought you into conservative politics?
Well, last time we had mentioned this, mostly it was you kind of just bringing to light all the craziness of the 2016 election with Trump, all the Democrats calling him a Nazi, a Putin shill and all this stuff. And I saw how unfair it was. And I feel like I'm all about fairness. I don't like to cast aspersions on people I don't know. I like to kind of look at the landscape, see how things are playing out, and try to keep a level head about things. Try not to get black-pilled. Try to, stay in the white pill, have hope, give people a chance. I had mentioned to you earlier about how everyone's going, what are we, like, we 18 months into this administration, and, everyone's losing their mind from, like, day one, and it's like, guys, can we at least give some time, to see how these policies work out, to see if they were a failure or not. I mean, as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day, so let's give peace a chance.
Yeah, I agree. So I think before you had come on today, I was talking to you over text, and I said, man, one thing that's been eating away at me and that I really wanted to share with the world is this what I see as a problem is how the Democrats have evolved into quite a progressive movement. And in my eyes, progressivism has turned more into a radical sort of extremism on the Democrat platform. And while many think there is still the existence of the far right, I think that more of the GOP conservative base has become more almost like a 1990s Democrat sort of base where there's some, very independent and very conservative mesh of politics, along with some democratic sort of ideology mixed in there as well, because everyone, has some form of liberal views that they share on one policy or another. Not everyone I feel like holds to the line on 100% conservative GOP Republican policy.
Well, I would just say it's a cautionary tale of being led by emotion. It's, and it's not exclusive to the left. You see it on the right, right now, especially with the Tucker Carlson wing of the Republican Party, where, they're losing their minds over subjects you really, can't know about. You don't have hard evidence. It's all circumstantial. It's all, just what would you call it? Like they're pulling at little strings here and there and trying to make connections where they don't, where they're not necessarily at, and it's, there's so much in the, out in the zeitgeist. It's like, yeah, I mean, you can start, making pinpoints from A to B to Z and look, I have a conclusion now. And it's like, no, I don't, that's not necessarily true. So it's like, and if you're all amped up in emotion and you already have this bias of a conclusion, so now you're finding things to come to your conclusions. So, I think we first saw that mostly with the left. And I think it was Christopher Rufo, if I'm not mistaken, maybe James Lindsay. And he was warning of the woke right. And I remember when I first heard that term, I scoffed at it. I thought it was crazy. And then once I just started seeing how crazy like Marjorie Taylor Greene was going, and like it's just like it's the same thing that I saw from the left, where it's just all emotion. There's no balanced fairness. Like, okay, I disagree. Let's see how this works out. I trust him. So and if it turns out to be a terrible thing, well, we know, that was not a good way to go.
Yeah, one of the things I think a lot of people forget about the conservative GOP MAGA Trump movement is how many former Democrats came over to the MAGA movement when Trump was running for his presidency in 2020. We have Tulsi Gabbard, we have RFK Jr., we have Joe Rogan, who joined the movement. And I think that one almost made people squirm because Joe was pretty much known as the, podcaster who embraced pretty much just everybody and anyone. And then to have him be affiliated, with the conservative movement, the tolerant left is not so tolerant of the conservative movement. We know that. Whereas the conservative movement, the GOPs, seem to be a little bit more tolerant of the left, especially people who don't hold those extreme progressive views.
As of now, I mean, what happens if the left, were to say Kamala did win? How tolerant would the right be? You know what I mean? So it's just one of those things. They're freaking out, right? They're seeing their worldview collapse around them, and they're just lashing out like toddlers. It's innately human to do that. To think that you need to, that the only thing that you can do is lash out in violence. When they would argue, oh, we tried the Democrat route or the Democratic route. We tried to vote. We tried to do all this thing. And, look at what it gave us. It gave us Trump. So, now we got to take matters into our own hands. And I think we're all susceptible to that. And the big thing is like I said, it's just stay grounded. First of all, you're just, like you and me, we're normal people. We're not, we're not in politics. We're certainly not up there. We can't really make any sort of difference except, let our voice be heard. But all that to say is that you need to just stay calm and then move forward with your life and roll with the punches.
Yeah, so hot topic this week in politics has been the Supreme Court ruling over the Voting Rights Act and the redistricting of congressional maps in states. We've seen a couple different states do this. We've seen Texas, which was basically where this all started. They redistrict their whole state, and they got a few congressional seats for the GOP. And so what happened was we saw an all-out escalation of all the states going after redistricting if it was possible. And so we saw now in California, they did it. They accomplished it. They grabbed a few more Democratic seats. We're seeing it now in Virginia. They tried. Supreme Court took the case, and they overturned and overruled that they were not allowed to redistrict based on race. And, this is the thing where I feel like a conservative looks at this and goes, well, that's just common sense. That's what the Constitution is here to uphold. But, the kind of crazy liberals out there screaming at the Supreme Court House, saying, how dare you take our rights away, when nobody took your rights away. We're just leaning onto the institution that was implemented into our government system in order to balance and let the pendulum swing where it may, right? So,
Well, the way I saw it, the Supreme Court closed the loop of the gamification of gerrymandering. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about power. It's not about rights. It's about a two-party system that has been at odds with itself since the inception of our country. I think the only president we had that was not a part of any political party was George Washington. So this is nothing new. So it's really what it is it's all about just creating emotion to try to drum up movement to, and to have people show up at the voting booth, to just get into power. Because at the end of the day, that's all it's about. And what I'm really frightened by is people who are in such heightened states of emotion are willing to do horrific things. And we already saw what the Democrats did in 2020 and how they tried to consolidate power as best they could, and the way they tried to coerce the social media companies to shape speech, and the way that they forced the vaccines on everyone. And it's just, why would I want to give you power? Like, I want the cost of living to come down. I don't want you to beat the Republicans, and vice versa. You know what I mean? I don't care about the tit for tat political party nonsense. I just want to give my kids the same livelihood that I had growing up. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I would like to go on a vacation. Unfortunately, I can't afford a vacation. It's ridiculous. And I just see these people, getting all riled up, and they think there's just easy solutions. You just got to vote the right person into power. And it's like, okay, what are those people saying? Are they saying how they're going to fix your life? Or are they vilifying someone and characterizing them as a villain? And it's just like, you have to stay away from that, because that is the enemy of the people at the end of the day, because it does not serve your interest. It serves a political party's interest.
Yeah, in 2020, we saw basically the full frontal assault of the Democratic Party against President Trump. We saw the zero tolerance. We want him out. We want him impeached. We want him charged with whatever criminal, offense that we can apply to him. We need to do whatever it takes to get him out of office. And finally, now the tally's up to 4 assassination attempts on Trump, and that's into his second term.
Well, that's his fault, right? He just needs to shut up.
Well, Trump.
At least that's what they say, right?
Well, yeah, so
it's ridiculous. You have one man saying some words against a chorus of people. And it's like, okay, so you have one guy that says some silly stuff, but then you have millions of people redirecting right straight back at him and then blaming him for their reaction. It's like, guys, like, you have control how you react to any given stimulus. So it's like, to blame everything that they say is true. Yes, he is divisive. Yes, absolutely. But the difference between you and me is when I hear him speak, I either agree, or I roll my eyes, or I turn it off if I don't agree, and I move on from that. I don't sit there and, well, actually, I did sit there and go through all the comments and have arguments with probably bots from Pakistan. So, I would really urge people to just, anytime you see a comment that, pricks the, the anger in the head, it's probably a troll account. So stay away. But yeah, my whole point is, it's like, he's one man, and you have a whole media apparatus, you have the whole democratic apparatus, you have all the people, you have the universities, and it's just like everything is mobilized against that one guy. It's absolute insanity. We've never really seen it before in this country. It's like, people didn't like George Bush, but, it wasn't, pure lunacy, derangement. The Republicans didn't like Obama, and it wasn't derangement. It's so crazy. It's like, first of all, like, I don't agree with a lot of things Obama said, but he's still a United States president, and I will always give him the respect of that, holding that office. It's like, come on, guys, like, let's get back to reality here.
Yeah, I think the average citizen who has common sense and dignity would be happy to shake any sitting president's hand and, show their appreciation. Maybe less Joe Biden.
Well, no, I would. I mean, especially when Joe Biden was lucid, man, you'd be laughing your ass off, guaranteed. He was an extremely charismatic individual. It was just, the problem is these people serve power. They don't serve the people, and it's all about either enriching themselves. Well, it's usually just about enriching themselves. We can go down that whole thing. Where it's just like, honestly, I just think the whole American economy has been looted by the political class and the multinational global corporations in collusion with each other, because they just see the rising power in China, and it's like, oh, it's a foregone conclusion. So it's like, well, we might as well loot what we can, while we can. And Trump and his cohort is, standing in the breach saying, no, we're going to try whatever we can to, turn this ship around. And it's like, well, I'm not a part of that political class that can just loot millions of dollars for myself and my family and go run off to the Caymans. So I'm going to stick with Trump, because what other choice do I have? MTG, Tucker Carlson, like what should I have voted for Kamala Harris and continued that whole draining of the American system?
No. And I think it's crazy to look back on history, because I feel like the more we look back on it and we look at what modern day politics, what's happening here is we start to see a pattern. And I think the deep state and the media apparatus and, just government institutions in general, our three-letter agencies, whether that's, security agencies or that's medical agencies, they do not like rogue presidents, ones that they cannot handle or tame.
What did Chuck Schumer say? Remember in 2017, they have 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you. You don't go against the intel community. You're like, you do realize the lunacy of what you just said. So you're saying the intelligence agencies have the power to overturn a sitting president that was democratically elected by the people? Huh. That seems like a tyranny.
These people like to push the limits of what that word means: anarchy, tyranny. And just like you've told me recently, everyone likes to say just enough, but little enough to claim, what did you tell me?
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. It's plausible deniability.
Yes, there you go.
Bring it all the way up to the line, but don't cross it. I mean, total warfare. Hakeem Jeffries, I don't know if it was before or after the assassination attempt. And it's like, guys, it's like, what's crazy actually is, like, if you look at how the Democrats treat Trump right now, I mean, how much communication do you think there is between the Democrat Party, Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer and President Trump? If they were actually trying to represent their constituents, they would be on the phone every single day advocating for their policy positions. Instead, it's, I'm on the airwaves screaming and yelling obscenities about nonsense, not getting anything through, but hey, we got a No Kings protest. Hey, we got protests all over the place. It's like, okay, well, what is that accomplishing? Absolutely nothing. So it's like, pick up the phone and talk to the guy. It's the same thing we saw with the Democrat, or with Joe Biden and Putin in the Ukraine war. Zero communication. And it's like, okay, so we're going to fight a proxy war with a nuclear nation, and you're not going to have any lines of communication. That just seems absolutely retarded. So what did Trump do? The first thing he did is he opened up the lines of communication again. And it's like, hey, at least we're talking, and the same thing with the Iran affair. It's like, at least he's talking. I mean, it's this tit for tat going back and forth. You have an unmovable object and an unstoppable force, and here we go. Trump's the unstoppable force and the Iranians are an immovable object. But at least they're talking. If Trump were to use the Democrat side of thing, it would just be a sledgehammer, no talking whatsoever. You cannot talk to your enemy. You cannot, absolutely not. It's like, you're insane.
Yeah,
yes,
so
absolutely talk.
who is the real enemy of free speech? Those are the questions that come to mind when, zero communication is there. Charlie would say, when you stop communicating, that's when acts of violence occur.
Yeah.
And
I mean, absolutely. And it's like, the Democrat leaders don't want to take any responsibility. But I think if they really were to calm or wanted to calm the situation down, they would just open up the phone lines, open up the dialogue. Let's talk. I mean, I just don't understand, like, what are these Democrat senators doing? The Senate is supposed to be where things cool down, where cooler heads prevail. It's not, the chaos of, the House of Representatives. So it's like, the only one we hear is John Fetterman, and then what are they doing? They're pushing him out of the party because even though he votes with them 95% of the time or whatever the statistic is, he's being pushed out because he doesn't say things that they like. It's so asinine. It's like, guys, wake up. You know what I mean?
yeah, I think in the Senate, in Congress, this is usually where we get our presidential runners coming through. I think that when we have a zero communication with the current presidency, that's because they're basically grandstanding basically to their constituents about they're going to be the next runner-up, and that they want to show them that they could stick it to the man, that the great ultra MAGA man, the orange man, they'll stick it to him and they'll do it at all costs. And they truly believe that their constituents want nothing to do with Trump or MAGA. And I saw this with the recent visit to the White House by the Los Angeles mayor, Karen Bass, who's running up against Spencer Pratt. And I'm not sure how that's going to go. I hope that we see Spencer Pratt prevail, but I was actually very surprised. Karen Bass has not been a big advocate of President Trump and his immigration raids in Los Angeles. And to see her go to the White House, shake his hand, stand side by side and take a picture, I thought that was quite poetic.
Well, look at Mamdani did the same thing right when he was elected. And it's just like, that is what real leaders do. You know what I mean? Like, I don't agree with the guy, but it's like, yeah, absolutely. You go and you try to create a bridge with your ideological adversary and see if you can, come to some sort of consensus on on some of these things. President Trump was not always a hardcore Republican. If anything, he became a Republican just so he could get elected, because there was no way he was going to get elected through the Democrats, even though he aligned with them.
Trump 4D chess right there, Cam, just because the guy was reading 10 years into the future before he ever ran. He knew 1990s Democrats were the modern day conservative, which is why he probably felt comfortable switching to the GOP. And then he saw an opportunity with very based conservative movement to prevail over Democratic ideology, which has gone more extreme left. And I think some of those policies, like Obama did a really good job at legalizing federally gay marriage. And that was a very liberal.
Well, through the courts.
Sure. But that was a very liberal, progressive victory for the Democrats. And I think that what Obama did, especially with single payer healthcare with the, Affordable Care Act, he basically was showing that we can enact these very progressive liberal policies. This is possible. But the problem is the Democrats didn't want to stop there. They took these things and they just wanted to escalate them even further, where I think a lot of conservatives then started feeling like a violation of their constitutional rights. you know, and this is like, you know, the crossover between religious freedom and, you know, politics, the gray area. And people started to get very hesitant, and, you know, people don't want to talk about these things because these are sensitive topics now. Um, Nobody wants to be an opponent to gay marriage because this is something that's federally legal. But also at the same time, for a lot of Christians and Catholics, this is a violation of their religious freedom. And I think they've also seen a deterioration of some of their religious institutions because they feel that, you know, with the churches and things like that embracing, you know, federal law and allowing for these things to go on, when in the past, prior to the legalization of gay marriage, these things weren't welcomed at the churches. But now you see more of a progressive church, and they just fear that, you know, maybe this is going too far.
Well, yeah, I mean, civilly gay marriage doesn't bother me, and in the least, it's more just a tax, you know, more like tax implications and stuff like that. You know, when you're talking about the church and everything like that, well, that onus isn't on me. That onus is on the priest, and God judges the teachers more harshly than the students. So I would warn, you know, them that tread lightly, you know, when it comes to going against God. But yeah, coming back to the political thing with progressive pushing more and more. I mean, that's what you do in politics, you know. But you always have to be aware that there's going to be the pendulum swing. So it's like if you're going to push that hard to the left, you're going to get an equal reaction that hard to the right. So that's why building a consensus is so smart, because it calms things down. And it's like at the end of the day, I don't really care what Indiana does. You know, I don't live in Indiana. I live in the Republic of California. You know, I care about what's happening here. And, you know, I think there are things that are, you know, the founders are right. There are issues that are better left to the states to deal with and what the populace of the states want, you know? So one thing I was thinking is like, you know, this whole issue with healthcare. It's like creating this one healthcare system where a room of 450 people who do not write the laws, they give it to lobbyists who write the laws, and they just put their name on it, you know, to create healthcare for people of Montana and Wyoming and Utah and California and Alabama. And it's what, you know, it like a committee. It's like it's the same problem with communism. A committee of 400 people isn't going to be able to create, you know, the competent healthcare for 330 million people. It would be smarter if the states dealt with it, but it's still, you know, you have the state bureaucracy. So there's no simple solution because, you know, as we see, you know, with the California governor's race, it's like at the end of the day, they're like, how are we going to, you know, how are we going to get more money and all this sort of stuff? And it's just like, get rid of the fraud. That's probably 30% of your budget right there. You know, the waste and the fraud. And it's like, I mean, crazy. It's like, what did Katie Porter say? Yes, absolutely. Illegal aliens. We're going to give them, you know, everyone deserves health care. You know, health care is a human right. And it's like, I mean, that just creates a national security implications because it's like, oh, okay. So China just, you know, it floods our country, you know, just to put more and more pressure on our welfare system to collapse it from the inside. It's like, you know, wake up. Like, yeah, absolutely. Would I love everyone to receive healthcare? Yeah, but it's like, it doesn't work like that. You know, you have to have guardrails to these issues. And it's like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a popularity contest, right? So you're like, I'm going to give you, everyone's getting candy. Everyone's getting everything they ever wanted. Vote for me, you know? And people vote.
Well, you know, one of the things I fear the most about, you know, living in a very liberal state, which is just like a supermajority Democratic legislature and things like that, and supermajority, congressional seats, and just everything just maxed out and liberalized, is knowing the fact that just because something is made law doesn't mean it's just. It doesn't mean that that someday will be overturned and made illegal once again. And we've seen it time and time again. I think one of the biggest issues I've had in California living here has been the extreme liberalization of the public education system. And not only that, but the healthcare system, which in sync with that. And I'm specifically getting towards the transgender movement, especially regarding children. I really, had a hard time digesting that sex change procedures for children became legal, and that that was able to go ahead and we were allowed to see that occur, just because I have a deep sense of always wanting to protect children and their innocence. And to me, I think that these radical parents often are pushing their ideology on their young children, and they are doing things that essentially are irreversible and are going to cause long-term harm, rather than allowing a child to, bear the fruits of their life and come up and make their own decisions as they get older and become adults. And now we've seen that, transgender or gender affirming care, as they call it, through all of our major medical institutions, has now become illegal in some states. And I'm thinking that in California, that's also become the case as well. And so they're stopping that gender affirming care. And just like I said, we've leaned in on the big, appellate courts. We've leaned in on the Supreme Court to weigh in on these decisions, because those are big, those are heavy laws that affect the social life of a lot of, Californians and Americans in general. And so, for once, that was one thing I had a really hard time digesting, just listening to me. Child mutilation was like the word that stuck for me. Because that's truly what I felt. And at one point I was saying, man, all of these doctors that are performing these gender affirming care surgeries should be, held accountable, like, the scientists in the Nuremberg trials. I'm thinking like they need to be tried. This is medical negligence. This is crazy.
Opportunism to make lots of money, and to have people that are dependent on the healthcare system for the rest of their lives with medications that will profit hundreds of thousands of dollars.
100%. And it terrifies me that we were even allowed to see it come to fruition for a brief period of time. And so those are the things where I think, yes, I think like regulation by the states for some laws, for some social policies, for certain things is a good thing. But also at the federal level, I do like to see, the Supreme Court, rule the law of the land. I do like to see a executive order come blanketed over the entire United States, whether that is upheld or not. But I like that it creates an argument. I definitely don't like to be a sitting duck on those types of subjects.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really hard, when you're considering children. I watch these videos and you see these, boomer liberal women talking about transgenderism and everything. And it's like, yeah, absolutely. A 3-year-old can choose their gender, and then, the person flips it around and it's like, yeah, and they want to get a tattoo. And it's like, oh, absolutely not. No tattoo. Those are forever. And you're like, and it's just like, it's in the mind that, you can just, oh, I'm just taking a pill and switching my gender back and forth. I can choose what I want to do. And there's no biological free lunch when you're talking about pharmaceuticals or, surgeries and things like that. So it's like, it's a huge issue. And then you actually, separately you see, kind of like this crisis amongst teenage boys taking steroids, 16-year-old kids just going full bore. And it's like, first of all, where are they even getting this stuff? And then second of all, you're sort of looking at it and you're like, you're 16 going on 42, it's like, there's no biological free lunch. And it's like, it's, I was listening to Joe Rogan today, and he had a gentleman on with an extremely difficult Sri Lankan name to pronounce. Chamayev, starts with a P, I think. And, he was talking about everything boils down to attention. It's all attention. Everyone wants attention. And it's like, absolutely. It's so true. And it's like, how how can I get the most amount of attention? I remember when I was a teenager, that was going to be tattoos. I was going to be tatted, from my toes all the way up to my neck. And I remember the first tattoo I got on my feet was Humble Life. And I got stoned and I looked at my feet and I was like, that's not very humble. And then right then and there, my tattoo ambitions died on the vine. And it was just like, at the end of the day, it was my insecurity and it was all about attention. And, with the transgender thing, it's like these moms, these like, stage moms that want attention. Oh, I have transgender kids. I think it was Charlize Theron or, whatever that, actress's name is. I think she adopted two African children, and miraculously, I think both of them, at 3 years old were transgender. So, what's the statistical probability of that occurring? Probably zero. But, there you go. At the end of the day, it's, I'm a beautiful aging actress, and my attention is waning. So this brings a lot of weight in Hollywood. So, hey, I have two African kids that I adopted that are transgender.
Well, I'm sorry to inject some Charlie, logic here, but he said it best. He said that if an 18-year-old thinks they're the opposite gender, they probably have a mental illness. If a 3-year-old thinks that they are the opposite gender, their mother probably has a mental illness.
Yes. And when you see the proliferation of SSRIs, I saw a video of Kamala Harris's stepdaughter, admitting, she's 26 years old. First of all, like, okay, I won't say that. That's not nice. But, she said she admitted she'd been on SSRIs for 15 years. So you were 11 when you got on antidepressants? How can an 11-year, like, what? Like, now we need to go back and we need to go look at that psychiatrist and see what's really going on here. Obviously, there's a broken family. I wouldn't be surprised if that was when, there was marital problems, with Doug Emhoff and his first wife.
Yeah, SSRIs, I've been doing a little bit of reading on those, and what the literature is telling me is pretty scary. It's basically the long-term use is chemical castration of your emotional state, in that you're basically severing those neurological connections that allow you to have empathy, love, all of the great emotions that you experience in life. And long-term use is proving to be pretty degrading to the human psyche.
Is it no wonder that people aren't having sex anymore? And like, it's like, what's the point? They have all this apathy, towards life. And it's like, and no wonder you have all these crazy school shootings and all this. And it's, it's always someone that's on something, on some sort of pharmaceutical. And it's like, at what point do we start looking at the prescribers, Because it's like, how did we deal with these, the issue of the mentally insane before? We put them into institutions, and then what did we do? Was it the 80s? Wasn't it Reagan that closed that down? And then that's when the farm that we have a pill, came out. And then do we remember mass shootings before that ever occurring? So, I mean, I know I, might be using circumstantial evidence to come to a conclusion. What is it? Correlation doesn't mean causation.
Yep. Well, you're talking about the prescribers. Well, I'm not talking prescribers of necessarily just medications, Cam. I'm talking about, with social policy too. When we're talking about transgenderism, when we're talking about gender theory, how did this become so mainstream? Well, it's because when you have a medical institution or you have doctors or, different agencies throughout the government telling you that these are real things or real concepts, how does somebody who isn't free of thought to think otherwise? You go to the doctor now at any major medical institution and they ask you on a form, what's your gender? And there's, 5 different boxes when back when, we were pro-reality as a nation, it was just male, female. Now you have 6 different boxes you can mark, and you have a major medical institution telling you, yes, this gender theory stuff is the real deal. This is a real concept. You are not, wrong in thinking this, when they are actually affirming your delusional thoughts.
Yeah, it's not an ideology at all. And all I can think about is what happened to the tomboys. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't know, like, okay, let's hear the argument out, right? So sex is binary, right? That's what it is. But then gender is on a spectrum. And it's like, okay, so gender is on a spectrum. So you have male identifying on one side and female on the other, and then you can have varying things. But it's more like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like just because I like to spend more time with my kids than my dad did, that doesn't make me more female. You know what I mean? Or just because I like to garden and, grow flowers, that doesn't make me female. So just because I have interest in feminine things doesn't make me a woman. You know what I mean?
Or being raised with four sisters.
Yeah, exactly. And they probably put makeup on you and they probably put you in dresses and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And it's just like, oh, Spencer liked it. He see how much fun he was having. He was like, yeah, he was playing with his sisters. That doesn't mean that he's a girl.
Well, it's no lie. I mean, there was definitely times in high school, because I was raised with four sisters, part of like who I was just a very respectful man of women. I was very shy of making any sort of like moves on girls. I was shy to make the first move on a first date.
Yeah, no
I mean,
male chauvinist in there, huh?
no, no. It took me into my college years to gain enough courage to be a man,
Yeah.
you know,
Assert yourself.
to assert myself as a man. But there was a point where my mom and one of my sisters cornered me one day because I was back when we were in high school. One of the things we always used to do is call each other gay all the time. It was just, dude, that word was thrown around, and it was when Obama came in 08 that term started to become a little less trendy. We started phasing that out, and we started going with oh my gosh, what are the ridiculous political correctness? We could no longer use those words. Those were highly inflammatory words, and even though I kind of grew up on that, and eventually it just was said so often, I just got burnt out on it, and I was just like, you guys really just think I am because that's what you call me all the time. Then they were like, oh well, are you? And I'm like, no. Like I'm just burnt out on this, man. Like, you guys just gotta, quit it. Like I just do things differently than like, a Cameron does because I don't have any brothers to model what that behavior should be like with women. I have four sisters who I've been told you never hit, you never, do anything disrespectful. You treat them with kindness. And that's what I just always thought. I was always too afraid as a man or a young boy to make any sort of mistakes with women, I should say.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So it's like you can see how you can really muddy the waters by talking about gender on a spectrum, and you can really convince people, right? It's an intrinsic value, right? It's not extrinsic, and like all this stuff. I remember in college, coming across that stuff, and I took a human nature class, philosophy class, and they were talking about this gender on a spectrum, and it's like, I don't buy it, it's like, yeah, you can express yourself many different ways in the way you dress and all that, but that doesn't it doesn't change who you are. Who you are is what God made you to be, and you are absolutely perfect, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You know what I mean? It's like, and if you want to dress a certain way, you have the freedom to do that. That is the beauty about our society. It's a little strange and people might be taken aback by it, but these days they won't be, they won't even blink at it. But, at the end of the day, they just don't force that stuff down. If you're respectful with me, I'm respectful with you. If you're disrespectful with me, I'm still going to be respectful with you because that's just how I was raised and that's how I believe a society should be ordered. It's like, and I can understand the PC stuff. I can understand, you don't bully and all that stuff. But if I'm amongst boys and, when we got some locker room talk, I mean, we say some unsavory things and it's all to get a laugh. At the end of the day, it isn't about targeting individuals or of a race or, or of a gender or anything like that. It's just simply banter amongst men.
Locker room banter.
Yep, and there's nothing better than it, and you're not getting rid of it.
That's right. And I think honestly, that's a great note to leave off on. And I think we're kind of at our max point right now. So until the next one on the Spark Show, Cam, it was a great episode 5. Great to have you again, and hope we can continue doing this.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks to the listeners for bearing with us. We
Yeah.
probably said and about 3,462 times.
Well, hey, for the 15 people that downloaded our last episode, we hope you download the next one and you share it with another 2, so that way we could work our way up to 30.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
Sounds good. All right. Well, we'll see you on the next episode of the Spark Show. Thanks for listening.
Peace.